All right, well, I want to welcome everyone to the Introduction to Insulated Concrete Forms, or ICFs. This course is brought to you by the Green Home Institute. I am the program manager here. My name is Brett Little, and I will be your moderator today. This course is approved for several different CEUs through US GBC, BPI, as well as our own internal program, the Certified Green Home Professional under the Energy pathway, as well as AIA Health, Welfare, and Safety, which may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license. And I'm super excited to introduce you and welcome back Jake with Our Value Homes, one of our members, and always great to see you, Jake. And so please take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Brett. I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and I need, there we go. Okay, is that showing up?
It is.
Okay, fantastic. So this is intended to be an introduction to insulating concrete forms. We will not be discussing installation practices, but we'll be just covering the what, the why, and some major differences between types of ICF. If I don't answer as a question as we go, like Brett mentioned, use that Q&A feature. We'll get to them at the end. And I can't answer every question. I have been involved in insulating concrete forms since 2004. The winter prior, I went to the world of concrete looking for something different. And ICFs kind of struck all the right chords with me. Energy efficiency. Always have had a love for concrete, durability. So those things really stood out to me, and I had been in the concrete industry for 10 years prior to that. I had heard about these crazy things and the people that do them from a lot of the pump drivers that would come and pump concrete in our regular old walls. And they'd tell me all the trials that homeowners would have. So I thought, there's no way it's that difficult. I can pour a straight wall, and sounds like there's room in industry for someone that can pour a straight wall. So that was kind of the impetus for getting into insulating concrete forms. So the first question is, oh, here we go. Here's the items that we'll cover. What is an ICF? Differences between the brands, products that work well, engineering, planning, installing, finishing, and enjoying. So first of all, what is an ICF? Well, this is not what an ICF is, contrary to what some people think when they hear about a concrete home. It does not need to look like a bunker. It can have windows, it can have corners. It, in fact, looks like any other home on the outside. So ICF stands for insulating, or some people will use insulated concrete form. The form is made of insulation, and that insulation stays in place after the pour. It becomes the insulation for your home. So we stack these blocks, and they integrate together very much like a Lego block. As we're stacking the block, we put in reinforcing steel. We install the window and door openings, and then we fill them with concrete. The furring is incorporated into the block already, into the foam. It's integrated in with that. So there's no need to fur these walls out, which is another common question I have. Do you need to fur them out? No, they have studs cast into the foam already. They're clearly marked on the outside of the foam. So you'll notice that if you can see the icon or the picture over here, it's 6 construction steps all in one. So you have concrete, steel reinforcing, insulation, air barrier, vapor barrier, and furring all in one step. So does it save time? Not on a normal home. It doesn't cost you any time either. When you get into a really large project, perhaps a barn or commercial size project, then yes, there is a time savings, but not really on a normal home. We don't see a difference there. So there's some major differences between types of insulating concrete forms. The first ones I'm going to cover are the foam-based ICF. And these are blocks that have foam insulation for the wall. So the first major difference is what is the concrete, the shape of the concrete. These days, the most common one you'll find, and unfortunately, is a flat wall. And that's just a uniform thickness of concrete throughout the entire home. That is the easiest to engineer. It's the easiest to pour. It just makes the most sense. There still do exist a few of the waffle grids or screen grids. The idea behind some of those was to save on concrete and to add more foam. The problem with those is they're very difficult to get completely filled with no voids, and they're less flexible with engineering, how big of a window opening you can have in them, and so on. So we don't see many of those anymore. The next difference is, are they going to come pre-assembled? Will they be folding, or will they be site assembled? So the image here shows one that is site assembled, and it comes with two sides that are disconnected, and as you're building the wall, you install the ties between the two sides to hold them together. Another popular type has them assembled already, but the webs are hinged so that they fold flat, and you can fit a lot more on a truck for delivery. You're not shipping so much air. And then the last one is they're pre-assembled and they don't fold, so we can fit about half as many on a truckload. There is very little difference once they are installed between all the different foam-based blocks. So when people ask, well, what's your favorite? I do have some favorites from an installation standpoint, but once they're done, the homeowners are going to enjoy the same benefits. Some of the better ICF forms are reversible. That means we can flip them upside down. And a couple of them have a full height stud. This is definitely an advantage. Some of the ICFs have a stud that stops a little bit short of the top and bottom. The positive to that is it's a space for running your electrical without having it cut through a plastic tie. The negative behind that is occasionally you go to nail or screw and there's not a tie where you're expecting there to be a tie. Our values on all of them that I'm aware of, you can order different thicknesses of foam, or at least inserts. You can insert more foam to get higher R values. The standard, industry standard is R22 or R23, depending on the exact block. And then you can add, as I mentioned, insulation almost to any point that you want. There are regional manufacturers, and there are manufacturers that have locations throughout the country. So some of the blocks I'm not going to be as familiar with because they may be only in the Southwest, Northeast, etc. The ones that I'm most familiar with are national brands. And it is definitely an advantage, especially if you're new to the industry or doing your own. It is a huge advantage to have one that has a local representation, somebody that will be boots on the ground to help you out. So that's differences between some of the foam-based blocks. And then we have foam-free insulating concrete forms. The two brands that I am aware of here and familiar with are nearly identical. There's no differences that I'm aware of between them. And these are made of a cement bonded wood fiber. The way it's been explained to me is that it's kind of like wood chips that have been soaked in a cement paste to the point where the minerals leach in and organic material is out, almost like fossilizing. That's not explained to me, but I'm not a scientist. These have some significant advantages over the foam base. One is they can absorb and release humidity, so they aid in regulating the humidity of a home. The next is that they're fireproof. I've literally held a torch up against these. They don't burn. Huge advantage, especially over the foam base. Another is that they're termite and insect proof. They can't eat through these. Insects could and rodents could chew the foam. They don't actually eat it, but they can chew it. Disadvantages is that they aren't airtight because of the nature of how the matrix is. You can get some air through them, and so they do need an air barrier added. Another disadvantage, and it's certainly not to the level of wood framing, but there is some thermal bridging because the web here is the same material. What holds the two sides together during the pour is the same material. So there's some limited thermal bridging there. You'll notice in the photo that the insulation is inserted inside these blocks and it's mineral wool. So again, that's another item that doesn't burn, and it's another item that insects and animals don't particularly care for. So some really big advantages, but a couple of disadvantages that have to be accounted for. You're going to use some different materials for finishing, and so that's going to be a little bit more expensive. The way that we have done it is on the inside, just apply plaster directly to it. Kind of locks into the rough nature of that form. And on the outside, we've stuccoed. If siding were going to be installed, that could be done. It would need to be screwed. And again, an air barrier would need to be installed. So there are some other differences between ICFs. Everything I've mentioned so far has been a horizontal installation, but there are a few of them out there that are a vertical ICF. I have experience on just one home with vertical ICF, and it was advertised that it would be significantly faster. Seemed to make sense too, especially in my previous life installing regular concrete forms. Those are vertical. I was pretty quick at that. We did not find that to be the case, but it might be right for some people or for some applications. There are also a couple of blocks out there that are made of a matrix of cement and foam mixed. Again, I don't know much about these. We don't use them. So I can't answer many questions about that. Then we'll get into why insulating concrete forms. The primary reason that people come to me and ask for an insulating concrete form home or are interested in it is for efficiency and or comfort. So what we do know about comfort is that it's a physiological feeling. Two people can be in the exact same room next to each other. One can be hot, one can be cold. So comfort is a difficult metric to use or hit. But one of the things we have learned about comfort is that our body perceives comfort by mean radiant temp. Mean as an average, radiant temperature. Another way to think about this would be the coldest surface in the room that your body can see or has a straight line to is a major factor that brings down the mean radiant temp. And that can make you a little bit chilly, even if the temperature in the room is at a normal or comfortable temperature. So one of the things we want to do in order to improve comfort is to have all surface temperatures in a home very, very, very close to one another. I like to have them less than 2 degrees apart. ICF is a major part of accomplishing this because it does not have any interruptions to the insulation. There's no thermal bridging. Most of the stud walls that are being built in our area have a lot of thermal bridging. The insulation is broken up by headers and by studs. by top and by bottom plates. So the ICFs contribute to comfort that way. 5 inches of EPS insulation is 93% efficient. You could double that and you only gain 3.5% in efficiency. So we're at a pretty good level already. Certainly you can improve performance with more, but it doesn't make sense for everyone. We're at a pretty good level of insulation already. And again, that is a continuous insulation, this uninterrupted. Since we have low heat gain and low heat loss, the temperatures throughout the home are a lot more consistent. You won't have the cold room or the hot room. And that means that heating system or cooling system will have much less work to do. That translates into low fan speeds. So what we find is we love to use a modulating furnace with a variable speed fan. And most of the time that's running on its lowest setting just for long periods of time. Again, contributing to comfort in the room. Convective looping is another item that a lot of people don't know about. This happens with loose fill insulations, such as fiberglass or cellulose when it's not dense packed. And even if your wall is airtight inside and outside, what you can have when there's a big temperature difference between the two sides is that the air within the wall cavity loops. It moves around and it actually accelerates the heat loss by bringing the heated air to the cool side of the wall. So a solid concrete wall with solid insulation has no convective looping. And so what we find is they perform extremely well compared to similarly insulated with loose fill walls. Final item of benefit is thermal mass. And that's not be a benefit for every climate, but in our climate here in West Michigan, the main advantage is in the spring and fall when you have temperatures that rise above comfort during the day and below at night. Very much like the last few days we've had. That thermal mass just evens that temperature out inside the home. Less advantage, but still an advantage, is that the thermal mass helps reduce your peak loading on the HVAC system when your temperature really drops or really rises for a couple of days. So we did a study with Grand Valley State University where they embedded temperature sensors in the concrete core of the wall. They did it every 3 feet vertically from the basement all the way to the top of the second story wall, and took a look at what those core temperatures did in relation to outside temperatures. And one of the conclusions from that study was that the core temperature changes roughly 30 to 48 hours after the outdoor temperature changes. What this means for you is that, again, if the temperature really drops, you get some sub-zero temperatures for a couple of days, you're not going to overload your HVAC system because it takes that long for the temperature to get through the wall. Another reason, see thermal bridging. The photo on the left is thermal bridging through a structural insulated panel roof. The photo on the right is thermal bridging through they call it an EFS system. So it's a wood stud wall with 2 inches of insulation on the outside. And in the case of that photo, you're noticing condensation in between the studs because of the temperature and humidity of the day, but that's evaporated at every single stud. So even in a case where you have outboard and continuous insulation, the thermal bridging through studs still is noticeable and significant. We're looking at a camera. It's a very famous image in the ICF industry, but let's just look at the image on the right. You'll notice a house with a lot of heat loss, very bright colors. But in that image on the right, just on the left side of it, you'll notice a different house with very low heat loss. That house is what we find in the left photo, and that's an insulating concrete form home. The heat loss is occurring at the windows. In the home on the right, the heat loss is occurring especially at all of the studs, the framing, but even in between. Here's an example of how thermal mass can help even out the highs and lows of the day and make it easier for your HVAC system to not have to work at 100%, but it can kind of run on cruise control. Another reason for insulating concrete forms is these walls don't leak air. The air leaks are going to occur at the transitions, meaning your windows, your doors, and at the roof line. So we have a lot less areas to pay attention to with detailing for air sealing. And it's pretty easy to get a tighter home using insulating concrete form walls. Again, it's not the one answer for a tight home, but it is a huge part of getting there very easily. Okay, next reason people will come to me looking at insulating concrete form homes is for health. How does an insulating concrete form contribute to health? Well, look at the image on the right there. That is from a stud wall. It's in the walkout area of a basement, and the inside has been covered with a vapor barrier. But what do we see happening? We are seeing condensation on that vapor barrier. That's a real problem. That is a potential for mold growth. In fact, mold growth is almost a guarantee in that situation. But with an insulating concrete form, we have a solid wall, and there's no dew point in the middle of the wall like many stud walls have. What I mean by that is when it's cold outside and warm and moist inside the home, there's going to be condensation potential inside your wall, unless it is detailed with enough insulation on the outside. But the most common stud walls people are building around here, they have a dew point inside the wall. At some point in the year, there's going to be moisture condensed in that wall. You better hope your wall can dry out fast. This one in the photo can't. So that's one way it contributes to health. Another is by controlling the humidity level in the home. Airtight homes are very, they don't dry out. So viruses and bacteria prefer really dry homes, and you might live in a home that dries out significantly in the winter. An ICF home does not do that. So not only do you grow less viruses and bacteria, but you'll also experience less dry skin, static electricity, bloody noses. Just things that you become accustomed to in your home in the winter do not happen in an ICF home. And also, since they're airtight, we can control all the air that comes into the home. We can filter out for allergens. We can provide enough fresh air. So insulated concrete form homes make it very easy to have healthy air. In these photos, you'll see the one on the left, we pulled some insulation back at home and see how dirty it is. That's from air moving through the insulation. In the one on the right, we have some, we pulled the insulation out of the way, and we can see that there has been a little bit of mold growth on the back of this sheeting. Another reason for insulating concrete forms is disaster resistance. Now, this is down the list of ways for people, but it's still a significant thing. Fortunately, here in West Michigan, we don't need to worry about rocks randomly rolling down the side of a mountain. But the homeowner in the photo on the left here is pretty glad that they had an ICF home that stopped that rock. They woke up in the middle of the night to that big crash, and that rock was stopped by an ICF wall. Home on the right, a car spun out of control, smashed into the home at over 40 miles an hour, and did very little damage to the outside of the home and did not make it through. Here we have some fire resistance on the left. This is a home that I did and was heating it overnight for the slab to cure. The heater is a radiant heater on top of a propane tank. Sometime during the night, it tipped and was resting up against the foam. When we got there in the morning, we were very glad to find out the foam had just melted, and that was it. Heater was still running. So there are combustion inhibitors in the foam. So it needs to be over 1100 degrees before it will really ignite. And if it does, that concrete is the 4-hour fire rated wall. So it takes 4 hours for a fire to get through that wall to burn something on the other side. Photo on the right, that's Hurricane Katrina. Been a while now, but the home that is still standing is an ICF home. All the homes around it are destroyed. Another reason for insulating concrete forms is durability. So even the best weather resistant barrier has to be installed right. And as you can see from this picture, a lot of people don't know how to install them right. Around the dryer vent there's big old holes. Around the electrical outlet as well, any rain running on the surface of this, this weather resistant barrier can get right inside the home. So ICF just eliminates a lot of possibility for error, especially from untrained people. The materials it's made of don't rot or decompose even when they get wet. And again, dew point in the wall is impossible, whether it's summer or winter. All of the stud walls we build make a compromise. They are going to optimize themselves for either winter performance or for summer performance. But in the off season, they have potential for condensation. ICF does not. This is a home that we did not build, but we resided. It was built 10 years prior to this work. So not an old home at all, but the homeowners here wanted different siding, and we added a couple inches of exterior insulation as well to improve the performance of the home. But we were quite surprised to find a lot of rot and sheathing damage. What you had, good materials, bad installation practices. The flashing was done improperly, and in a 10-year-old home, we had to replace some of that sheathing because it was rotted beyond restoration. So that kind of thing is just eliminated with ICF. In fact, these homeowners wouldn't have even known they had a problem until it was really significant if we weren't doing this work for them. Next reason people are interested in ICFs is because it's quiet. And I would say this is actually the number one reason, or the number one thing people love about their home after they moved in. The number one comment I get. Nobody can believe how quiet it is. You don't even think you're living in a loud area. I'm rural. I'm surrounded by 80 acres of farmland, but the sound reduction of these walls is fantastic. Very much appreciated during storms or high wind events. Another is life cycle cost. This is less thought of, but you will pay more for an insulated concrete form home, but an ICF home is going to last a whole lot longer. So the life cycle cost is quite a bit less. So ICF construction is part of a comprehensive strategy to build a home that's comfortable, efficient, durable, and so on. But it's just one part of the plan. It's not a silver bullet. It's just a step in the right direction. So you can't take, say, a code-built home and just swap out the ICF walls and expect that it's going to perform extremely well. You need to have it as part of an entire strategy. So next, we'll look into products that go well with insulating concrete forms. And one of them is a pre-assembled window buck, actually built in West Michigan here out of an LSL material, laminated strand lumber, 1.5 inch thick. It's zinc borate treated, so it's rated for concrete contact, can handle the weather. And this is something I highly recommend because you can hang heavy doors and windows in it with confidence. There are some foam bucks out there that have less thermal bridging, but at 12 inches thick, these bucks are already significantly outperforming the windows. So I think the advantages that they offer outweigh any disadvantage. They have some dovetail groove on the back side that's routed in. And so when we pour the concrete, that concrete locks into the dovetail, and these bucks then are airtight and solid. They're not going to move. They don't shrink, they don't warp, cut, split like normal treated lumber. Another product that goes really well with ICFs is micro rebar. It is a small steel fiber that has a twisted shape to it that becomes structural. We mix it in with the concrete, pour it into the forms, and it replaces much of the rebar in our walls. What I love about this is that I always know I have the rebar in the exact right spot. We have less cracking. Well, they advertise less cracking, not that I've torn the foam off the wall to see. And it's peace of mind knowing I've got the best reinforcement possible. Another item that I alluded to earlier is extra insulation. So most of the ICF brands, the foam-based ones, have 2.5 or 2 5/8 insulation on each side of the wall for a total of 5 inches or 5.25 inches. Several of the brands out there offer upgrades to thicker walls. The one shown here is a 4-inch thick wall for a total of 8 inches of insulation. Other brands offer inserts that, as you're assembling the wall, you can slide these inserts inside the wall to add insulation. The advantage to that is we could put more of the insulation on the outside of the wall and actually improve the thermal mass effect by moving the thermal mass closer to the inside. Another product that we highly recommend is the connectors made by Simpson for attaching the floor system. And these allow us some flexibility. We can adjust the floor up or down. We can actually laser it in place after the pour. And by not setting on a ledge, which is another way of doing it, but by not setting on a ledge, we can get these floors dead level. Another one would be dimple membrane drainage board. It's sometimes called for waterproofing. This has kind of 2 waterproofing strategies in one. The dimples create an air gap behind it. So if anything penetrates it, that air gap is like a second line of defense and allows the moisture to drain down to your footing drains and be carried away. There are spray-on waterproofings that can be used. Some of the spray-on ones will eat foam, so that's something that should be tested first. But a disadvantage to a spray-on membrane is that it's more easily punctured during backfill. And then how does the electrical work? Another major question here is a couple ways of doing it. There on the right, we see a box that has a flange. That flange is simply screwed in to a stud in the ICF. On the left is a box that's made specifically for insulating concrete forms that can be placed anywhere in the wall. In the photo on the left, we've used a hot knife to cut out some foam. And the photo on the right, we've used an electric chainsaw to create a groove. In each case, the wire is shoved into the groove, and after electrical inspection, it's refoamed in place. Next, let's discuss engineering. Not much I'm going to say here, except that there's been a lot of pre-engineering done for insulating concrete forms. In fact, most of the manufacturers have published their own tables that you can use to engineer your home. As long as your home is kind of average, where your ceiling heights are going to be less than 10 feet, and your window openings aren't over 12, you're going to find that you can just look up tables for all of your engineering, how much rebar to put in and where. When you get outside kind of the norm, then it's not very difficult at all to hire a structural engineer. Structural engineers work with concrete walls all the time. And so the fact that it's an insulating concrete form wall doesn't change anything. It's still just a 6-inch or an 8-inch or a 10-inch wall. The form is completely irrelevant. So any structural engineer that knows how to engineer concrete can do the special cases that you might need. All right, so then let's plan for how we're going to build, how we're going to design a home, rather. So wall thickness is the first thing that's different. When you're converting a print from a stud construction to ICF construction, it's simplest to keep the outside dimensions the same, but then you might find that you're squeezing some of your rooms or window sizes a little bit. In the image that I've included here, this is from a home that we converted, and the window on the bottom there in the center, that one had to become a little bit narrower because my wall thickness was greater. It was right next to a corner, but when I made the wall thicker, it had to move a little bit further away. So that's an example of one of the things the difficulties that might happen. So your wall thicknesses are going to be at least 11 inches, depending again on the particular form that you use. We also prefer to have more space between our window and door openings. We want to get more than 12 inches of concrete between them. Either that or just make it one big opening with a bunch of windows. We'd also like to have a window further than 16 inches from a corner. When they get too close, that's when you actually need to consult an engineer for how to build that, because the pre-engineering doesn't allow that. Can it be done? Yeah, we've done it, but you need to consult with an engineer. Also, we're going to like our jogs to be a little bit longer than normal. Some homes will have just a 12-inch or 16-inch jog in the wall. We want those jogs to be 24 inches at the minimum. Another difference is you need to firm up your window sizes before these walls get set. We got to order the window bucks to the right size, and modifying things later is a lot trickier in an insulated concrete form home than it is in a standard home. So place your window order before you actually start setting any blocks. That way, you know it's not going to change. Keep it simple, stupid. That's the KISS principle. Some of you are familiar with that. A lot of times an architect will say, well, should I try to make my dimensions of the home to fit so you don't have to ever trim a single block? You would spend way more time on that than you will ever save. So no, don't. Don't try to set your wall heights up exactly so that you don't have to rip a block, and don't set your wall lengths up exactly so you don't have to cut a block. It's very simple to rip a block. It's not hard to cut a block. Just build the dimensions you would like. All right, so how do we install them? I mentioned I wasn't going to get into installation, how to install. I'm just going to give a broad overview of how it goes. So we set up and pour one floor level at a time. So we'll do the basement from footing to just above where the floor joists are going to be. Usually that's somewhere around 10 feet, 10'6" is one pour. We pour that wall. And then as we're stacking it, I mentioned we add horizontal rebar. When we get to a certain height, we set up our bracing system, which is also our scaffolding system. And that allows us to get a little bit higher. Once we've stacked that wall full height, we insert the vertical rebar. And then we work on any beam pockets or sleeves through the wall. Finally, we can pour, and the next day or a couple days later, depending on temperature, we can remove that bracing and begin subfloor installation. Here's a photo of how we notch for the windows as we're stacking the walls, as well as what's a beam pocket look like? Well, beam pocket is where we just add foam inside the wall, and then after the pour, we cut that and remove the foam out. Finishing. How do you finish a wall? Well, one of the differences with ICF is that there is what we call the transition area. That is the area between the waterproof and the siding. A lot of people don't know this, but the building code requires 8 inches of exposed foundation between grade and siding, probably mostly to protect the siding from moisture damage. But another reason for that is that it allows you to visually inspect if there's any termites getting in your home, because the termites will make a tunnel on the outside of the wall to get up to the wood of a stud wall and eat it. So that 8-inch area allows you to watch for termites. In our homes, or I should say in ICF homes, it has been observed that termites can burrow into the foam unnoticed. So we don't want to actually leave any foam uncovered, because we don't want to give access to termites if there are termites. So we're going to go right from the waterproofing to a either a synthetic stucco, or we've used PVC sheets. They come in 4x10 sheets and 3/8 thick. Rip them and install them, lapping over the waterproofing, and then with the siding beginning by lapping over that. Lately, we've been using a fiber cement that we found that is a 1/4 inch thick and ground contact rated. But no matter what, you need to cover that area. No exposed foam, period. So that's the transition area. For termite control, this is another common question. In areas where termites are known to be a problem, there are different practices you're going to employ. But kind of the basic practice, no matter what, if there's not known to be a problem, is just not leaving anything uncovered. Other strategies, there are some proprietary materials made, a piece of metal that is installed as you're stacking the wall. That's a physical barrier to keep termites out. There are some ICF forms that you can purchase with borate added to them, which is a insect deterrent. There's also the idea of actually removing a strip of foam prior to the pour and allowing the concrete to come right out to the edge there, so that the termites can't get through that. So the exact strategy you're going to employ is going to depend on how great of a problem you have. So in the photo on the left here, you see a area. That's a piece of fiber cement, and it laps over the waterproofing. Photo on the right is that proprietary metal strip that I spoke of. That's a physical barrier to keep them out, keep termites out. Finishing for framing, I already mentioned the common way that we attach the subfloor. Another way that folks will often do it is to pour a ledge. That ledge can be formed by a brick ledge block, or it can be formed by a wider basement wall than the main level wall. Trusses, that's not too difficult to do, actually very normal. For most of the time, we're just leaving anchor bolts out the top of the wall. and you bolt the top plate on and then set your trusses on that. Where we're actually kind of beefing things up a bit to make them more high wind resistant, we'll skip that top plate. We'll embed a strap in the concrete that wraps over every single truss, and that gives it greater wind resistance. And here you see a photo of that strap. There really are not limitations on siding. As this photo demonstrates, you see 3 different types of siding on one ICF home. There's vertical metal, there's horizontal wood, tongue and groove, and then there's fiber cement panels. It can all be done. Nailing is the siding in is technically not supported by any of the ICF manufacturers. They all recommend screwing the siding in. We nail it, guys. I recognize that's not supported. I've only heard of one instance. It did not happen with me, but I've heard of one instance where a company was nailing their siding in the winter and their studs were shattering as they nailed them. It must have been very cold or a bad blend of plastic for those studs. We nailed them. So stucco, when stucco is being used, or a synthetic stucco, that is applied directly over the ICF. No prep is needed other than just rasping it to get a rough surface. Brick, we can use brick ledges. We can install thin brick over it. So just about everything can be done here. Here we show some photos of LP, can't mention that, another wood-based siding and a vinyl siding. And in fact, on the one on the right, we were having some trouble. We wanted to verify that our flashing was working. And so we ran a garden hose above this for over an hour and no water inside. As I mentioned, the electrical back in place. Afterward, you'll see that here. Photo on the right is of an electric chainsaw that's used. So electric chainsaw or a hot knife are the 2 common methods. One is much messier than the other. You can guess which that is. It's also a lot faster. So that's completely up to you guys. What most electricians will do is come down vertically and only go horizontally when they're going a short distance. The problem with going horizontal is you have to cut through the plastic studs. So that's a little bit more work. Definitely recommend filling this groove in with foam after your inspection. Plumbing, by the way, before we get to trim, plumbing is not any different. You don't run your plumbing in exterior walls. So plumbing is no different. Into trim work, how do you hang cabinets? What we have arrived on is we install plywood on the wall where the cabinets are going to be. In fact, we install the plywood just a hair smaller than what the cabinets are, and we use lots of screws then to hang that plywood and fasten it to the ICF. Then drywall butts up against it, and when we install our upper cabinets, then they completely cover the plywood, and we can then screw them in anywhere into the plywood. We don't have to try to find a stud. So that's how that cabinets are done. Base trim, our trim carpenter doesn't do this method, but this is a method that's possible, is running plywood, again, before drywall, slightly smaller height than your base trim, and that can be screwed or nailed into your studs, and then your base trim can be nailed like normal. My trim carpenter just uses longer nails and hits the ICF studs. We are often using drywall returns at the windows and just a wood sill. But you could use a long extension jam. It would be a site-built one. but drywall returns are very popular look these days anyways. Then we want to talk about HVAC just a little bit. You have to, do not try to skip this, guys. If you're spending the extra to build an ICF home, do it all the way, do it right. You want balanced ventilation. By that, I mean, you're not using a bathroom fan to get rid of stale or moist air and just crossing your fingers to hope you're getting good air in. Use balanced ventilation. An HRV or ERV, heat recovery ventilator, or energy recovery ventilator, these bring in the same amount of fresh air as the stale air they exhaust. Some of the better ones will actually use air quality sensors to determine how often to run. So you want to do this to make sure you have the right amount of fresh air and you're getting rid of stale air build up. In fact, I'll tell just one anecdote of living in an ICF home with a heat recovery ventilator. Never did we ever have a new home smell from day one. But when we went away on vacation, this was 2.5 years after moving in. We went away on a week's vacation. I shut off the HRV while we were going to be gone. Came back and there was new home smell. So what that tells me is that HRV is constantly getting rid of off-gassing. And a new home can off-gas for a while, depending on the materials you use. So it's a very valuable thing. In addition, we're not then relying on how windy it is outside to make sure we have enough fresh air and oxygen in the home. So that's one must. You must do this. The next thing that we recommend is to use a modulating furnace or heat pump. Not just a 2-stage, but modulating, or there's some 5-stage units out there that work well too. And this is because, again, most of the time your heat load is very, very, very low, and you don't want to be paying for an HVAC system to run at 100% and 0% and 100% and 0%. You want it to run long and low, like a car on cruise control on a flat highway. Another problem with not doing a modulating system is that your air conditioner will literally not run long enough to dehumidify the home because your heat load is going to be so low. And it's designed for the extreme. If you only have a normal air conditioner or 2-stage, it's still going to run for such a short time, it won't be able to pull humidity out of the air. So a modulating or at least 5-stage air conditioning system, highly recommended. All right, what's it like to live in an ICF home? So these are comments that we've heard from multiple homeowners. One is, I haven't dusted in months. This probably changes years in because you've built up some dirt in the home. I don't know, but we've heard this one several times. There's just a lot less dust in the home. And that, again, is because the home is airtight and we're filtering in the air we bring in. Another one is that the doors close funny. This is something to be aware of. What do I mean by this? Well, if you have a window open, the doors don't close funny. With your windows closed, the doors close funny. It's airtight. And so you have to pull against a little bit of air to close that door all the way. So that's a little bit different. It's been in every single home we've built. Open a window, it goes away. Another thing is, you don't really notice how windy out it is sometimes until you open the door and step outside. And that is because of how quiet the home is. And it's also because the home doesn't have any shudder or shake at all whatsoever from the wind gusts. These are nearly imperceptible, maybe, in your home, depending on how old it is, but they're not there at all in an ICF home. And after living in it, that's when you notice it. You notice, oh, I guess my old home did shake a little bit. It's almost an awkward feeling to stand inside and look out the window and see the trees and leaves and everything blowing all over, because you're thinking, I don't hear it, I don't feel it. So it's almost like watching a movie. You will still hear some noise, although it's much quieter. You're going to hear some noises through your windows and through your ceiling. Now, triple pane windows definitely do improve the amount of sound that goes through them, but it's not like your home is going to be perfectly quiet, but the walls cut out an immense amount of sound. Another thing is you kind of get used to how low and quiet your HVAC system is, and you forget about it until you're visiting somebody else's house and theirs kicks on. You, I have literally said to people, what is that noise? And then immediately realized what it was and been quite embarrassed. So that's one of the benefits of an ICF home, is your HVAC system is really quiet because it runs long and it runs low. So that is the conclusion. And at this point, I'd like to open it up for questions.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, thanks so much, Jake. Can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect. I am going to real quick go into something, but we do have a ton of questions, so I do want to get to those. Just real quick, if you are looking to get your CEUs in the future and you're watching this, make sure to take that quiz with an 80% passing rate. You can find that quiz on our Thinkific channel. Otherwise, you can find it on USGBC or wherever you may be taking the course. And again, for those of you watching this live, make sure to check your spam and mark certs@gutenbergcerts.com safe. If you've stayed this long, you are approved for CEUs, so you're good to go. And as always, a huge thanks to our board of directors, our volunteers, our new executive director, Jose Reina, and all of our sponsors, especially our top tier, Mitsubishi, Build, Equinox, and Rheem, all trying to help you build better. So yeah, Jake, there are a ton of questions here. I want to go back to one in regards to the code. And code is different in every state, in every city, every jurisdiction. Code officials apply different rules based on their own feelings in many cases. So obviously you can't solve all of our problems, but can you just talk a little bit about where to start if ICF isn't listed in the code, or how you kind of deal with the code with ICF?
Well, I have to say I'm a bit fortunate that we have, I live in an area where most people are familiar with it. I've only had a couple of inspectors who weren't, and I brought out what's called the prescriptive manual. The prescriptive manual, you can search this and find it. It is developed by the National Association of Home Builders. It is incorporated into the national code. So if your state has adopted that, it's incorporated into that, and that has all the engineering info in there. And simply open that up, show the inspector, this is the height of wall I'm doing, this is the thickness, this is the wind load we're shooting for, and it tells me what to do for my reinforcing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great.
So it has not been too much trouble, because by the time I bring it out, most of the people say, oh, wow, you know what you're doing.
Great, thanks. So let's talk a little bit about this foam-free ICF. I was surprised that I'd never heard of that. And when you talked about it, I was really intrigued, and there were some comments here about it as well. And so maybe let's talk quickly about the thermal bridging aspect. Is there a way to get rid of that thermal bridge issue, or can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, there would be a way, and that would be to add mineral wool insulation on the outside of the entire building. Mm-hmm. But I need to point out that the thermal bridging is a lot less than in a stud wall, because the material, by nature of it being somewhat porous, has a greater R value than wood does. Mm-hmm. So the thermal bridging is lower. It's not enough where I would consider it a problem unless we're building a passive home.
And I assume to some extent, is that the same conversation with the air tightness issue? I mean, the question, is would you then just apply some sort of exterior coating or air barrier, or what would you do about the air tightness issue?
Good question. That depends on what finishes we're going to use inside and out. My inclination is when we're putting, say, a clapboard siding on, is that I would want to apply a fluid barrier to the outside of it. Mm-hmm. I would not want to try to use a sheet type WRB. I think that would be too problematic. Just in this particular application. But that's something that I think is a big conversation. I can't give you a quick answer.
Mm-hmm. How often do you use the foam free versus traditional, and what would make you, make a decision like that?
Okay, that's done at customer request. When there are customers that are either wanting that extra level of fire protection, or we've had one where they just simply didn't want any foam in their home. I'm not exactly certain on the reasons for that. So it's done at customer request because, one, it's a little bit harder to do, and two, it's a little bit more expensive.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So this is a great segue into a question that I've been wanting to ask you for a while, and maybe people bring it up. But, you clearly, net zero, building to net zero, that's getting easier and easier. You know that because we see you achieving it in many of your projects, which is awesome. And so obviously the next direction that we need to head is where we're starting to understand embodied energy, upfront energy, being locked into a building, 20% of the carbon it will emit is locked in from the beginning. So given that, people push back against concrete as one of the sort of biggest enemies of embodied energy. What would you say to them in regards to that conversation? Obviously, it seems like the foam-free approach is heading in that direction, doesn't get rid of the concrete. But what are your thoughts on that if that were to come up, and how those two could coexist together?
Yeah, well, the first thing I'd have to say is I have a lot to learn in this regard. Mm-hmm. However, the question I would have, I don't have an answer. The question I have, though, is given the lifetime of concrete, and this concrete, by the way, is going to last longer than an exposed concrete wall because it's conditioned. It doesn't see the frost, the freezing and thawing. So we can expect it's going to last hundreds and hundreds of years. Hmm. So the question is, when it's factored out over that longer lifespan, is the embodied energy actually greater than a stud home? Mm-hmm. So I would just want to look at that. Mm-hmm. And then, especially by the time we count the energy that it's actually using to heat and cool compared to a stud home, I would be really surprised if the embodied energy were a problem when it's factored out over generations.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Hey, Deborah, one of our members here, a question. I've seen insulated bucks. Wouldn't they be better than LSL with fewer thermal breaks? Any disadvantages?
Okay, yeah, and that's a good question. I just barely touched on that. But wood has an R value of somewhere around 1.5 per inch. We're 11 inches thick here, so we're getting close to an R20 for that 1.5 inch wide buck. And I'm putting that right next to, at best, an R7 window that's covering a huge area. So I really think it's a moot point. I really do. Would foam be better? It would be slightly better for efficiency, yes. But I'm more concerned about durability. And those foam blocks do not have the strength. I have kids and they love to slam heavy doors. I would prefer to know that I'm not relying on foam holding that door in place. So that's what's driven me to these wood bucks.
So, I have heard if people don't have the budget or the capacity to go full ICF, from a, potential safety application, they might make a safe room or maybe make a bathroom out of an ICF where they can hide in during a tornado. How often do you see that being requested? Do you get involved in that at all, or do you only build all ICF?
Yeah, good question. That seems to be common in the Western states where basements are not popular. I've never had a request in 17 years for it here. So I think that's where it's being done mostly is Tornado Alley and in areas where basements aren't possible.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Brian, welcome. Glad you could join us. He said he's been told not to use micro bar with ICF, that they stick into the sides when poured and don't get distributed correctly. Is there a way to make sure they're installed correctly?
Well, it's in with the concrete, and as it's coming down the chute, you can see it is throughout the matrix, just like the stone is. This sounds like something that is maybe anecdotal, and there is literally no testing on. But when we have cored through an ICF wall with a micro rebar, I have seen it evenly distributed, just like when it comes down the chute. I really think this is a scare tactic.
Thanks. With the Simpson floor connections, do you need to cut out the foam for direct connection to concrete?
I should have mentioned that, and I'm sorry. No, you're cutting just 2 slits into the foam, and then this product shoves in through the foam and fastens back into the concrete. So it's done before the pour, and so when I pour, the concrete locks it in place. It's fully engineered.
Hey, Aaron, good to see you out there. His question is compared to, have you compared costs of precast concrete walls, like for example, Great Lakes Superior walls, and what are your thoughts there?
Superior walls are lower cost. Absolutely. They have some advantages. I'm really, for the purpose of this, I'll just say they're lower cost.
All right. Are interior RCF walls sheetrocked or just mudded in general?
Okay, another good question. There are products made that can apply directly over the ICF to finish the inside. I have several times attempted to get contractors to use them on my homes, but I have not found a plasterer willing to do those. And that those apply at like 3/16 stick. So far, the only 2 things we've done are regular old 1/2 inch plaster or 1/2 inch drywall.
Another question that came in, are you casting chases for vents, other penetrations in your forms prior to pouring, or core drilling after the fact?
Both. We'll do sleeves beforehand on everything that we know we're going to need. But yeah, occasionally you miss something and you have to core it.
Have you ever heard of people replacing? So the question is, can existing non-street facing masonry walls with common brick and legacy buildings, it's a very specific question, be replaced with ICF, or just in general, maybe talk about, additions or renovations?
Okay. Yeah, a replacement, that sounds like it would get extremely complicated. I'd probably want a specific application to address, but additions, yeah, we have done several additions. There's no problem whatsoever with doing that. How do we attach it? We're going to have a treated board lagged into the existing home, and it's going to run vertically. And then we'll run structural connectors through from that grab the concrete when we pour the concrete. So that's kind of how it's attached to the home.
You obviously do a lot, and we've talked about in previous webinars. If you all haven't checked it out, we did a virtual walkthrough with Jake. So you got to go back on our webinars and take a look at one of his homes that we did that on. But, we talked about, thermal mass and a lot about passive solar strategies. So just real quick, can you tell us just in the summertime, if you're using thermal mass, is there a risk of overheating the house if not done correctly?
Good question. So there's a risk of overheating in the winter more than the summer, because in the summer you're already running your air conditioning. The question is specific to passive solar design with an ICF. And to my knowledge, any passive solar home is at risk of overheating. Is it more so with ICF? Not if we pour a concrete floor to help regulate that. I don't believe it's at a greater chance than stud construction.
Mm-hmm. That study you were talking about with GVSU, first of all, is that something that is available that you could share maybe in a follow-up email with everybody?
What I can do is I have to reach out to the lady that offered it and get the full study. I only got preliminary results. So yeah, if anyone's interested, I'm certainly willing to do that.
Okay. But yeah, on that study, I just was wondering, as they're looking at the wall and, the retainment of heat, if that was just based on, the HVAC itself maintaining the heater, did the sun, come into play with that?
Well, they put it on the north wall, so I do know that sun was not a factor there.
Okay. Let's see if there's some comments here. Interesting comments here. So thanks everyone for making your comments. I guess that, there's a comment here kind of going back to the embodied energy. If you've ever investigated lower carbon concrete at all.
Well, not really. No, it hasn't been requested. This would be something that would be, if there's a demand for it, yeah, I can look into it.
Right. Got it. Yeah. So, looking at the sort of the mortgage appraisal and insurance industry, what kind of drawbacks or opportunities do you see there? So, for example, do insurers know how to insure these appropriately? Are you getting the insurance benefits of the resiliency aspects? And then kind of on the negative side, do mortgages and companies and appraisers even understand how to fully appraise these things and price them properly? Is it more difficult to get mortgages?
Good question. So the first one on insurance, yeah, it's simple to get a masonry construction discount. That's a piece of cake. You can go a step beyond that, and the insurance industry is banded together to form what they call Fortified for Safer Living, which is a program kind of like Green Star, but for durability. And you could build a home to those standards and get a further level of insurance savings. But yeah, insurance is really easy. Mortgages, no, the appraisal industry has not kept up with energy efficiency. There's been a long push for this, but it just hasn't happened yet, where most appraisers give you $1 more for it. But honestly, even though building new is expensive now, we're not encountering problems more so than my stick builder friends are with appraisers.
Yeah, speaking of costs, did you notice ICF construction, as more competitive as wood costs skyrocketed? And I know those are coming back down, or did, cost of ICF just continue to rise along with it?
Good question. It did get more competitive. ICF construction did go up due to the foam made from, of course, the oil industry. Concrete is in very stable cost, so that didn't affect it. So yeah, we did go up some. We didn't go as much as wood, so the gap did shrink. I haven't yet seen that gap open up, and there's talk that the price of ICF is going to come back down. So I do think we went from somewhere around a 5-6% upgrade to around a 2%.
Thank you. Interesting. How do you prevent ground moisture by capillary effect coming up the ICF wall pad and getting into the attic area?
Yeah, good question. There's two methods. One is you pour your footing on drained crushed stone so that the footing itself never sees it, and then you backfill right around it with stone as well. So your footing never sees moisture. The second is to pour in either the footings or the first lift of ICF wall, something called Vapor Lock. Vapor Lock 2020. It's a product that's mixed in with the concrete that eliminates moisture movement.
You had mentioned the spray-on membrane that you suggested, which might have been a problem with backfilling, and then also eating foam. If someone were to use mineral wool instead of the foam, is that still a problem, at least in that case?
No, it's not.
Okay. Good. I don't see any other specific comments here or questions here, just lots of great comments and some great feedback from everyone. So thank you, everyone. I guess before we wrap up, where do you see from your vantage point, any future innovations in ICF? What's coming? I mean, foam free, I think, stands out as one. I think that's interesting. We seeing a huge uptick in interest in that, lowering embodied energy, but just outside of those things, what else are you seeing out there?
Well, the industry is going to thicker and thicker foam or greater amounts of insulation. Another thing that's just getting started in is panelization, where you actually order them pre-assembled and they come to the job site one wall at a time. Mm-hmm. And related to that, there's at least one company out there that's pre-cutting everything for you. You send them your prints and your window sizes, they pre-cut and they label every piece, and you just, all you have to do is assemble. So that's kind of a hybrid option. So those are the things that I'm seeing advancements in the industry.
Hmm. Great. Well, Jake, we really appreciate you taking some time out of your day. I know you're out there building a lot of homes to do this presentation and help educate everyone. Where can people contact you to either learn more or if they want to get a project started in West Michigan?
Yeah, I appreciate that. rvaluehomes.com. That's just the letter R, the word value, and the word homes.com is how you can get in touch.
Yeah, great. Well, hey, it was good to virtually see you. Hopefully we'll catch up on site sometime or at a tour around town. So
sounds good,
care, Jake.
Brett. Thank you.
Yeah,
bye.
See ya. Bye.
Be sure to check out all of our courses available online that you can watch anytime and anywhere to pick up your CEUs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to get weekly updates and stay up to date on green building science courses, webinars, and home tours. Thanks again.